4 years ago, we purchased this house, and as we were looking at the neighborhood, we noticed all the neighbors have shrubs and lawns that are immaculately groomed. I'm not into that, so I pulled out a bunch of shrubs that have stickers, and I don't like stickers, thorns, and planted a elderberry right here. It's not pretty like some of the shrubs, but I don't care. I like fruit and vegetables. I did leave the roses around the front door. I cut them down. The previous two owners didn't spend a lot of time on their yard. And here we live on a corner lot, and here's an elderberry plant growing there. This is my immediate neighbor. That particular tree is a variety of mulberry, and it's got a lot of dead wood in it. It's just like a rat's nest of wood, and there it is a few weeks later in the early spring where it's starting to cover with leaves, and they look beautiful, but they require a lot of care. We had a big one in our backyard. This is the branches from that particular mulberry tree in our yard, and as you can see in the distance there's the trunk. It's 12 inches in diameter. My neighbor's was 4 inches in diameter trunk, and a nice little rock garden around it. And the previous owner had planted bluebell flowers. Well, you can't eat bluebell flowers, so I planted butternut squash. We love butternut squash. We save the seeds year after year. They do very well. And then every 2 weeks or so, I took a picture of it so you could see the progress. And they filled in the area around that stump very nicely. I'm glad it's on my side, the private side of that fence, so the public can't see it. They may appreciate it, they may not. But since it's hidden, I don't have to care. And they produced a very heavy crop this year. As you can see there, it's 12 inches in diameter. A nightmare. These are the branches that were on the public side of the fence. It took a long time to do that, to clean it all up. This is a Queen Anne cherry tree. Produces fabulous cherries, but they let it grow too high. I had to take the third of it off. Cherry trees you can't groom too quickly, so you got to do it every few years. These are the branches of the cherry tree. These particular boards are 2 by 6 by 12. I'm going to make a raised bed, and I'll use those cherry branches underneath the dirt so I don't have to haul quite so much soil. And here's another couple of sawhorses with more 2 by 6s. And I painted them with a deck stain up against the ground. I'll use 2 by 4 pressure treated lumber so that it lasts a little longer. And there in the distance you can see the chicken coop that I have. I have 7 chickens, no roosters. And those are the cherry branches that I put down first inside that raised bed. You can see the pressure treated lumber up against the dirt. I put down black plastic to kill the grass. And then on top of the cherry branches, I put a layer of the mulberry tree branches. Those that are in cluster there, but I spread them out, and then I stomped them down to pack it down a little bit. And then I went into the chicken yard and started hauling dirt, buckets and buckets of dirt out of the chicken yard. It's very high in nitrogen, so I knew that it would inhibit the growth of fruit, but it would do very well for leaves and branches, and that's what happened. If you just walk through the chicken yard, you can see on the other side of the other door is where the raised bed is, so it wasn't a very long distance. We start our seeds every spring about the 1st of March, and then we put them under grow lights, and then on the days that are not too windy or too cold, we'll take them outside for a few hours to harden them off, get them ready to be transplanted outside. And some plants are still very sensitive to cold, like tomatoes, but things like broccoli and lettuce, they do very well if there's a mild frost. That rock garden has 8 blueberry plants in it, or it used to. The deer came in one night through the gate and ate them down to little nubs. But don't waste your time with blueberries if you live in Utah. It's just too dry. They don't handle the dry weather very well. And besides, the birds get them. I was going to make some hoops to cover the blueberries with nets, but realized it's just the wrong soil. Here's a pasture just a couple blocks from my house, where in the middle of the day the deer are out there grazing. They are almost domesticated animals. There's a nectarine tree and a peach tree that we planted a year ago, and they're both doing extremely well. The broccoli's doing well. On the other side of that, you can see the peas are growing, and then my wife put a bunch of the cherry branches in the ground as a trellis for the peas to grow up. I didn't have time to make another raised bed, so we just put soil on the ground for the potatoes. And then these are tomato plants. Now, I had to go over to Window World to see if they had any surplus windows to cover this so that they wouldn't freeze at night, because even though the plants are big, they're still not ready to handle cold. And they did well. At the base of this one area, I planted asparagus from seed. Don't ever do that. Just buy your cluster of roots from Martha Washington asparagus, and you'll have asparagus the first year. I was one board short, and so I had a piece of scrap lumber that's 4 inches too short, but it suits my purposes. When you're building something like this, if you have 2 drills, it saves you a lot of time. So you don't have to keep changing bits when you're drilling your holes, pre-drilling your holes, and then driving your deck screws in. It's just so convenient to have 2 drills, and they're cheap now. It's springtime, but 1,000-foot elevation above our house, it snowed last night. So it's very important to cover your tomatoes. And the doors from Window World scrap bin work just fine. We put some rocks around that potato patch. My neighbor grows lots of potatoes, and they gave us 4 different varieties, and they work beautifully. There on the left, you can see the potatoes are doing very well. We learned that some potatoes taste better than others. Then in the distance there is a vineyard. I'll show you how you start your own vineyard at the end. These potatoes are coming along extremely well. And there's some lettuce and zucchini. Zucchini always does well. It's really hard not to grow zucchini well. And then there's that little vineyard again. There's 2 cherry trees in the yard. This is a pie cherry tree. Most pie cherries are too tart to eat. You can only cook with them. But this one's a very sweet pie cherry. So I took the third top of it off because we have fruit flies here, and if you don't spray them, you don't get any fruit. Now, grapes. Let me tell you how to grow grapes. These are table grapes, and that's the only thing I know anything about. The one on the right is a Concord table grape. You'd have to trim the branches off, and if you stick them in a bucket of water with a little rooting hormone, almost 100% of them will grow new grapevines. And then after a month or so, you stick them in some soil. This is in a concrete mixing tray. They do extremely well. I gave most of them away, and I kept a dozen or so for myself, stuck them in the ground. They do extremely well. The 2 types of grapes we have are a golden seedless grape, and then the Concord seedless grape as well. Grapes only grow on new growth. They don't grow on last year's or previous year's growth at all. And the tiny little flowers have a very small green grape at the base of them. The reason they have green in them is because they have chlorophyll in them. They're making sugar. So you have to make sure when they start growing that you cut the leaves away a little bit so that the sunlight can get to them. And you cut the branches 2 leaves beyond every cluster of grapes. Don't let the branches grow wild. The tiny little grapes and the little flowers require spraying also. So you wait till the petal fall, and then you start spraying. And then you measure 2 leaf clusters beyond the grape cluster, and you cut the branch off. And then when the grapes are about an eighth of an inch in diameter, you have to cut the cluster in half if you want large table grapes. Now we're going after grape juice this year, so we only cut a third of each cluster off. And you still have to cut the leaves away as well, so that the sunlight can get to them to make the grapes that much sweeter. It seems terrible to have to cut some of the grapes away, but if you want larger grapes, you've got to do it. And then every 2 weeks you have to spray, keep the fruit flies away, and continue to cut away the excess branches. You fertilize it with 10-10-10 every 2 weeks, and then once a month you give it a little extra potash, and they produce just a fabulous crop if you continue to do that. Remember not to harvest them until the sugar content is quite high, and we don't have a meter to measure sugar, so you just have to pick a few now and then. And usually the grapes aren't ready until September, when the leaves start turning a little bit brown. But as you can see, the production on these 2 vines was just tremendous. Very satisfying, and to me it looks nice to have them around. Everybody grows an avocado seed now and then. It's too cold for avocado trees here, but if you haul it in and out, keep it in the house in the wintertime. I've had an avocado now for 4 years. They don't produce fruit till they're about 6 years old. I don't know if I'm going to spend that amount of time hauling it in and out every day. Take it outside when it's warm enough. Leave it indoors. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoy your garden as well. Thank you.